Tonight on 24, the US president says the Islamic Republic needs to raise the white flag of surrender.
I can say this, Iran wants to make a deal. What I don't like about Iran is they'll talk to me with such great respect.
Donald Trump has said that despite its warmongering rhetoric, Iran is secretly looking for a deal because it doesn't have an army to fight with. London's warning to Tehran about fueling anti-Semitism in Britain, Starmer has said attempts to create hatred and violence in society won't be tolerated. And new Iranian air attacks on the UAE in recent hours. Abu Dhabi says it can respond to any aggression effectively, a wave of criticism against the Islamic Republic.
From the Iran International Studio, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad.
Viewers of Iran International in Iran and around the world, hello and good evening. The US president an hour ago at the White House, referring to what he called the destruction of the Islamic Republic's military capability, said Tehran must, according to him, raise the white flag of surrender, but it's too proud to do so. Donald Trump has also said that despite their warmongering rhetoric, Islamic Republic officials are secretly seeking a deal because their army is gone, and soon they'll only have air rifles to shoot at the US Army. Trump has likened the US military's naval blockade of Iran to a single piece of steel and said this action has been very effective. He also said that the rise in global oil prices has been lower than he expected before the war started.
The best thing is that when the war ends, prices will go back to how they were before, and then everyone will realize they should buy oil from America, which is safer and even better quality. They're learning to change their consumption habits. Buy from America. So when we started this war, I thought the market would drop by 25%, and I thought that was a good outcome too, because we can't let these guys get nuclear weapons. I thought oil might reach $200 or $250 or $300. And I knew that this was short-term, but well, today, when I look, I say 12. And this is a very small price increase. It's a very small price to pay to stop these crazies from getting nuclear weapons.
Mentally deranged.
Marzi Hosseini, our correspondent, has joined us from outside the White House. Marzi, it's clear that even though tensions have risen significantly and the ceasefire has practically been violated on the ground, the White House, the Department of Defense, or the Pentagon are trying to downplay these tensions and portray Iran's capabilities as very limited.
That's right, Fardad. We were very clearly aware of this, both at today's Pentagon press conference and in the remarks Trump made, that the ceasefire hasn't been violated. And the press says there's also a possibility that Trump might specifically overlook the recent attacks carried out by the Islamic Republic, especially against regional countries and the UAE. But the remarks Trump is making today are also very important. Trump's main point in his remarks is that if the Islamic Republic is wise and not too proud, it has, even in the current time frame, accepted and understood that it must surrender. What both Trump and General Dan Kane referred to today is the very significant reduction in the Islamic Republic's naval capabilities. General Dan Kane also said, before, the attacks they carried out against us were with 20 or 30 boats simultaneously. Now they come and do it with 5 or 6 boats. And Trump also mentioned, he said, they had 159 vessels that we shot down for them in the first week of the war. As a result, this significant reduction in naval power, as an example of the overall decrease in the Islamic Republic's military capabilities, this means that they are secretly seeking negotiations, seeking an agreement, but on their own country's platforms, they are actually making completely different statements. Another important point that Trump has mentioned several times over the past 24 hours is arming the people inside Iran, both in this speech he gave today inside the White House and in an interview he had before that. Trump said, "I am willing." He said it twice. Once he said, "I am willing," and another time he said, "Although I am still hesitant about whether we should arm the people inside Iran." His argument was that, "I don't want to witness a massacre similar to the past inside Iran," meaning the killing of 42,000 people again, and his emphasis is that if weapons are distributed among the people inside Iran, the internal balance will be adjusted. In contrast, for example, with 250 people and 5 people who don't have weapons or do, the situation completely changes. Senator Lindsey Graham also brought up these points. Senator Graham emphasized that, according to the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which mandates the right to bear arms for American citizens, we should use this very principle to distribute weapons to the people inside Iran, because in that case, we ourselves won't need to send American forces and American soldiers into Iranian territory. And the last point Trump brought up in his remarks today was that we will absolutely not allow these madmen, referring to the Islamic Republic, access to nuclear weapons. Let's hear Trump's remarks.
We can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon. You might be too young for this.
نمیتونیم اجازه بدیم ایران به سلاح هسته‌ای دست پیدا کنه. شاید شما برای درک این موضوع خیلی جوان باشید، اما نمیتوان اجازه داد عده‌ای دیوانه به سلاح هسته‌ای برسن، چون دنیا به خطر میفته. ما رکوردهای بازار سهام رو شکستیم. داو جونز به رکورد رسید و S&P هم رکورد جدیدی زد. گفته بودن رسیدن به این اعداد سالها طول میکشه، اما ما خیلی زود به اون رسیدیم. من 8 جنگ رو پایان دادم، کاری که هیچ کس قبلا نکرده بود. حتی کسی که جایزه نوبل گرفته گفت این جایزه باید به رئیس جمهور ترامپ برسه. بعد به تیمم گفتم که همه رکوردها رو شکستیم، اما حالا باید ضربه‌ای رو بپذیریم، چون باید برای از بین بردن برنامه هسته‌ای ایران اقدام کنیم. اونها ظرف 2 هفته میتونستن به سلاح هسته‌ای برسن. ما با بمب افکن بیدوت این توان رو نابود کردیم. کاملا از بین رفت. اگر این کار رو نمی‌کردیم شاید اینجا نبودیم. خاورمیانه از بین میرفت. اسرائیل نابود میشد و بعد اروپا و ما هدف قرار می‌گرفتیم. ما اجازه نمیدیم چنین افرادی به سلاح هسته‌ای دست پیدا کنن. ما اونها رو به شدت شکست دادیم. حالا به قایق‌های کوچک با یه مسلسل روی اونها محدود شدن. قبلا 159 کشتی داشتن، اما همه در همان هفته اول نابود شدند و در کف دریا هستند. نیروی دریایی ندارن. نیروی هوایی هم همینطور.
But alongside these remarks, the press analysis is also interesting. 3 reports have been published by CNN, Axios, and the Wall Street Journal. And the gist of the analyses being published is that although Mr. Dan Kine and Mr. P pretend they don't really care about this ceasefire violation, they are secretly reviewing attack orders and various options and scenarios for how this attack would unfold. These media outlets say that specifically 3 options for an attack are currently on Mr. Trump's table. 1, CNN says targeted attacks and assassinations of Islamic Republic leaders. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal says Trump's next targets will probably be attacks on energy facilities inside Iran in response to the Islamic Republic's attacks on energy facilities in Fujairah. And finally, they also say the least likely option is probably attacks on the Islamic Republic's missile launch platforms, those very platforms through which it has, in a way, threatened the security of the Strait of Hormuz.
Thank you, Marzi. Let me mention my colleague Husseini from outside the White House that in about half an hour at 3 p.m. local time in eastern U.S., Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, is also scheduled to hold a press conference at the White House, and as soon as it begins, we will take you there. Regarding the United States' efforts to restore the Strait of Hormuz, an hour ago, the U.S. Secretary of War, in a press conference with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said that the Strait of Hormuz Freedom Project has been successfully completed, and all commercial vessels, except for those of the Islamic Republic, have the right to free passage through this waterway.
As you know, President Trump has officially ordered CENTCOM to establish and maintain free commercial flow in the critical Strait of Hormuz, under the banner of Operation Freedom. It is important to emphasize that this operation is completely distinct and separate from Operation Epic Fury. Operation Freedom is strictly defensive in its nature. Its strategic objective is highly focused, clearly defined, and temporary. The primary goal is simply one thing: protecting vital civilian shipping vessels against unwarranted Iranian aggressions. United States naval and air forces do not need to enter sovereign Iranian territory, because there is absolutely no tactical necessity, but we will certainly not allow Iran to misuse or threaten this essential international waterway.
Shahir Shahid Salis, an international relations and Iran affairs analyst from Calgary, Canada, has joined us. Mr. Shahid Salis, America has started an interesting game, hasn't it? It keeps saying that these limited attacks by Iran are not a ceasefire violation, and it has put the ball in Iran's court. It also seems unlikely, at least so far, that Iran would want to directly attack American ships, or even further afield, Israel. Its only target, it seems, has been the United Arab Emirates up to this point. How much is the ball now in the Islamic Republic's court, and how much can it tolerate these conditions?
Yes, that is an interesting question, and your understanding is completely correct. The public statements that Mr. Hess made today and the remarks General Keane made both clearly align. They firmly stated that we are absolutely not looking to initiate a war. He explicitly emphasized that we are not looking for war right now. Furthermore, General Keane also came back and clarified that the actions the Islamic Republic has taken thus far fall well below our military threshold of tolerance, essentially meaning, up to this point, these provocative attacks it has carried out on the UAE or on the commercial ships that happened yesterday simply do not matter enough to us to trigger a response. And both of them also strongly emphasize that the ceasefire is still officially in effect. However, looking at this developing situation, really anyone, even if they are not too involved in complex global political matters, clearly understands that these conditions have become incredibly fragile. For example, yesterday, only 2 commercial ships successfully passed through the highly contested Strait of Hormuz. That is absolutely it, meaning there haven't been any other reports of maritime movement today. Furthermore, just minutes ago, Al Jazeera urgently reported from Iran that ships wanting to safely pass through the area must get official permission from Iranian authorities, otherwise they are in extreme danger. Now, considering these highly volatile conditions, will a giant commercial oil tanker, for example, really come and deliberately violate what the IRGC is demanding and continue on its way like that? Because these valuable vessels have to pass through Omani waters. They clearly cannot enter Iranian waters. But even there, if they go ahead and blatantly ignore the direct threats from the Islamic Republic and the IRGC, will shipping companies really take such a massive security risk? In my opinion, it is highly unlikely that this new maritime initiative, which they have now called the Strait of Hormuz Freedom Project, will successfully lead to international shipping there becoming completely normal and getting back on track. In my opinion, it's highly unlikely. And even if they want to do this, as you also mentioned, will the Islamic Republic really tolerate it? And will 1 or 2 attacks and shootings not cause the flames of war to ignite again? The situation seems very fragile to me.
How much do you think the mechanism and front of the war might change? Because now it's clear the United Arab Emirates is the main target. To what extent do you think Abu Dhabi will tolerate this? Can we imagine a scenario where a new full-scale war breaks out, but this time, instead of Israel and the United States, the UAE gets involved, or the UAE and America?
No, in my opinion, beyond what America and Israel really did in those 40 days, I truly don't understand what else the UAE could possibly do unless it resorts to attacking Iran's vital infrastructure, like Iran's energy facilities, for example, targeting Karg Island or bombing major oil refineries, in which case, well, the UAE itself, given its very small geographic size and vulnerable coastline, would face retaliation.
While unfortunately our connection with Mr. Shahid Salas was lost, I apologize if we could reconnect with him, amidst growing concerns about the influence of foreign governments, including the Islamic Republic, in fueling anti-Semitism in Britain. The country's minister has warned that attempts to destabilize British society will not be tolerated. Keir Starmer has said London is investigating whether foreign countries played a role in recent attacks against the Jewish community in Britain. These remarks come as concerns about anti-Semitism in Britain have increased in recent days following a knife attack on 2 Jewish men in London and an arson attack on a building.
Our message to Iran.
Our clear message to Iran or any other foreign nation that may seek to deliberately fuel violence, hatred, or division within our society is that this interference will absolutely not be tolerated. That is precisely why we are fast-tracking comprehensive legislation to forcefully counter these insidious threats to our national security. Furthermore, we are acutely aware of the fact that modern anti-Semitism does not originate from just one single source. Islamist extremism, the far left, and the far right all unjustly target our Jewish communities. Therefore, the government is implementing the first coordinated national plan to strengthen societal cohesion and counter extremism in all its forms.
G. Solomon, a journalist with a free press from Washington, D.C., is with us, and he's also the executive director of research at the Program on Extremism at George Washington University. Thank you, Mr. Solomon. You also, by the way, wrote an article in the Free Press about the role the Islamic Republic is playing in anti-Semitic attacks. Are there documents and evidence suggesting that these attacks are now systematically supported by the Islamic Republic government, or are some of them a continuation of these these anti-Semitic or anti-Israeli attacks that have occurred as a result of the war after October 7th?
I mean, that's an interesting.
That is certainly an interesting question. Through my ongoing conversations with a lot of intelligence officials in Europe, the US, and Israel, a consensus has emerged. They firmly believe it operates as a coordinated network structure. For instance, there have been concerning attacks that we've seen in London, the Netherlands, and Belgium over the last 2 months. We're seeing strong evidence that the Iranian government has probably put together a covert infrastructure, likely managed through the Revolutionary Guard. And we are increasingly observing that there is also a relatively sophisticated network of hired operatives. A significant portion of these individuals are merely teenagers. They are young, impressionable, and often already known to local law enforcement as petty criminals. In many cases, they probably might not even know the true identity of who is actually paying them. They are just carrying out these acts strictly for the quick money. By utilizing these local proxies, the orchestrators are actively trying to create a profound sense of terror in various European countries. This ongoing destabilization is definitely a primary strategic goal of the Iranian regime. They deliberately exploit these youths to establish plausible deniability, maintaining a calculated distance between themselves and those taking this money. This tactic is highly similar to a pattern of transnational repression we have seen from Iran in the past. For example, we have seen members of organized criminal gangs from Eastern Europe accused of trying to assassinate high-profile targets, such as the prominent Iranian journalist and vocal dissident Masih Ali-Nejad in New York. In earlier instances, we saw that Iranian agents physically went there and directly paid someone to carry out this lethal operation on behalf of the regime. But now we are seeing another, more sophisticated component emerge. Today, these operatives are getting paid remotely via untraceable methods, and they are receiving encrypted software through secure Telegram channels to coordinate. Ultimately, the Iranian regime has created a new insulated level of distance between itself and these hitmen, providing them with much stronger plausible deniability.
It seems that for global law enforcement, the financial aspect of these operations might actually be the easier component to monitor by tracking illicit funding streams, whether the targets are prominent Jewish institutions, outspoken journalists, or the very television station we work for, Iran International. Various entities have been subjected to similar hostile attacks. However, beyond merely providing clandestine financial aid, it appears the Islamic Republic is deeply invested in systemic brainwashing campaigns by actively trying to influence public opinion through state media, weaponized social networks, or educational institutions across Europe. The regime strategically attempts to win over the hearts of many who sympathize with Palestinians or oppose Jews. That's also a much more dangerous crisis, because even if the Islamic Republic were to fall, assuming it does, the minds that have been changed can't be controlled that easily.
Yes, without a doubt. This is the profoundly difficult aspect of this whole situation. This is precisely where fighting modern terrorism gets remarkably tough for law enforcement. The masterminds behind the scenes have developed highly effective, evasive tactics. So either they buy vulnerable people with a promise of money, or they manipulate susceptible individuals through extremist ideology. And well, this strategic method is exactly how they try to deliberately create and consistently maintain a safe operational distance between themselves and the actual perpetrators of these heinous crimes. One major concern among global security experts is that these kinds of seemingly isolated low-tech attacks can just snowball rapidly and get bigger and bigger, inspiring unpredictable copycat incidents across different communities. For example, to illustrate this alarming trend, there was a terrifying knife attack just last week in North London. In that tragic incident, a citizen named Hay openly claimed responsibility for this vicious knife attack, deliberately focused on 2 Jewish men. This perfectly underscores the current danger. But, well, it is not entirely clear if they really had a concrete role, or if they just wanted to use this unfolding opportunity to make themselves seem far more active and influential than they actually are. As you accurately said, these initial actions can easily set a massive ball rolling, and then others look around and say, okay, let's get involved in this too, even if they might not have been directly hired, compensated, or formally recruited. This unpredictable domino effect is the truly dangerous aspect of these complex issues. It functions almost like an invisible hand. Sometimes that hand remains invisible, while sometimes it is not. This shifting dynamic makes fighting this pervasive phenomenon incredibly difficult.
The issue of anti-Semitism, especially in Europe, is really no longer a theoretical thing. I mean, you just have to go to many European capitals. Right here in London, you see synagogues protected by armed forces. You see schools for Jewish children protected by armed forces. One of my Israeli friends was telling me that just a few days ago in Denmark, he got into an Uber, and the Uber driver was of Muslim descent. And when he found out he was Israeli, he made him get out of the car. How much do you think European governments, have taken sufficient action action, and has the genie left the bottle? Is there anything they can do now to restore calm for the Jewish community?
Well, it is truly a tough and complex situation. Right now, the British government has faced the most intense public criticism lately. Especially notable was Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who gave an important speech today and urgently called for more robust security measures to protect the Jewish community. But, well, throughout these last few years, not just across England, but in the US too, we have seen widespread anti-Israeli protests that sadly often carried a deeply troubling anti-Semitic flavor as well.
روی یهودی ستیزانه هم داشتن.
Fighting global terrorism becomes exceptionally difficult when there is this much pervasive anti-Jewish and anti-Israeli sentiment present in society. Consequently, a great deal of justified criticism is, currently, being directed at various European governments, as well as state and local governments throughout the US. For example, within higher education, specifically on college campuses and university environments, we clearly see that there hasn't been much meaningful effort by administrators to counter these ongoing protests. Disturbingly, these demonstrations have become intensely anti-Semitic in many cases, frequently crossing into outright pro-Hamas or pro-IRGC advocacy. So yeah, when looking at these kinds of devastating attacks, especially when such deep-seated hostile feelings are really strong, the main criticism consistently brought up is that not enough has been done to proactively prevent this tragic explosion. Many people, particularly in the immediate aftermath of the October 7th attacks, were genuinely surprised and frustrated that not enough was done at the senior leadership level to boldly come out and clearly say, no, we urgently need to stop these attacks before more innocent lives are tragically lost. As you rightly pointed out, in both America and Europe, this alarming situation is clearly still ongoing. There was a highly significant attack just a few short weeks ago in America, specifically targeting a Jewish school in Michigan, as well as a local synagogue. Tragically, several innocent people were killed there too. And once again, it was a devastating attack that was widely said to have been explicitly inspired by Hezbollah. You know, a few years ago, Salman Rushdie was almost like assassinated. There too, again, the assailant had obtained propaganda materials, propaganda resources through Hezbollah. So the situation is serious in both America and Europe.
Currently, there is only one country with a Jewish majority, and that is Israel. Naturally, the future fate of many Jewish people globally is deeply tied to Israel's political fate. How much do you think Jewish communities face a widespread public relations problem, specifically because of Israel? Because it is not just about threats from extremist Islamists. We know that white extremist right-wingers, even within America and other nations, also harbor deeply anti-Semitic views. How much do you think the Israeli government has actively played a role in shaping this dynamic? And what tangible steps can the Israeli government take to improve the broader public image of Jews?
Well, this is a highly complex and difficult topic, because it is an issue that goes all the way back to the historic time of the creation and establishment of the modern state of Israel. Historically, many Jews who lived in diaspora communities all over the world shared a profound concern. Their genuine fear was, well, if a sovereign Jewish state is officially formed and established, many people might tell us, now that you finally have a Jewish country, why don't you just pack up and go live in your own nation? Naturally, in America, the government and a vast majority of the public firmly support Israel's fundamental right to exist. Furthermore, in the immediate aftermath of the tragic events of October 7th, that steadfast support for Israel was strongly reaffirmed. Naturally, one doesn't necessarily have to agree with all actions of the Israeli government. I observe that in America, many Jewish individuals try to direct their political attacks toward Prime Minister Netanyahu very personally. Perhaps as a way to socially protect themselves from broader backlash, they specifically choose to criticize Netanyahu. So they often claim that they support the state of Israel, but they don't necessarily support Prime Minister Netanyahu's current policies. Now, will this polarized situation finally subside when the war in Gaza and the war with Iran stop? Honestly, I don't know. For many Jews around the world, this lingering uncertainty is genuinely a bit scary. We know that immediately after the tragic events of October 7th, many people told me that global support for Israel had significantly increased. I explicitly told them, just wait a few days, wait a few weeks. This sympathetic situation is very fleeting, and harsh criticism of Israel will inevitably increase again, even more so. And sadly, that's exactly what happened. So I genuinely do not know to what extent the Israeli government itself can or should play a direct role here. Whether it is the US government, authorities in Britain, or local Jewish communities, they must address this pressing issue, because these are fundamentally domestic matters. Naturally, Jewish Americans and Jewish Britons are constantly faced with a deeply unfair accusation that their true political loyalty is primarily to the State of Israel, rather than their home countries. If they actively go to the Israeli government for institutional help, this damaging accusation of dual loyalty will inevitably become even heavier. In my opinion, it is vastly better and far more effective for this sensitive issue to be resolved entirely at the local level.
Thank you, J.J. Solomon, journalist at Free Press, joining us from Washington, D.C. Right now, as we're speaking, I see that they're slowly preparing the podium for the arrival of Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, who is scheduled to speak at the White House today. Given that Caroline Lloyd, the usual White House spokesperson, is on maternity leave for her child's birth, we will go to the White House as soon as she begins her remarks. An hour ago, the lawyer for the family of Nobel Peace Prize laureate Narges Mohammadi spoke at a press conference about the health status of this human rights activist. Meanwhile, the Narges Mohammadi Foundation has said that Narges Mohammadi's condition is still unstable after being transferred from Zanjan prison to the hospital. My colleague Nilufar Pour-Ebrahim reports.
Shirin Ardakani, the lawyer representing Narges Mohammadi's family, gave a detailed report to the French media in Paris at a press conference regarding the alarming situation of this prominent human rights activist and Nobel Peace Prize laureate. It is the 5th consecutive day, according to her statements, that Ms. Mohammadi is in the intensive care unit, or ICU, of Zanjan Hospital under exceedingly strict security measures. She remained in a highly critical medical condition, which, according to Ardakani, is the worst she has experienced during her time in prison over these past years. She has suffered 2 heart attacks. In these 3 months she's been in Zanjan prison, she's lost 20 kilograms, so much so that, according to her, she's unrecognizable and has changed a lot from before. Her physical condition, which was already very critical before this, she says is between life and death. And if the situation continues like this, and she, in a way, takes her last breaths, the international community will be responsible. She points out that with these actions, the Islamic Republic is, in a way, carrying her death sentence. To pressure her and also to break her, they are, in fact, in a way, not allowing her transfer to Tehran and her treatment under the supervision of her specialist doctors. Ms. Mohammadi's lawyer also refers to a complaint she has prepared and sent to the United Nations and also the UN Human Rights Commission. In this regard, she has called for the formation of a committee consisting of the International Red Cross and also Doctors Without Borders to visit Iran's prisons, to investigate the situation of political prisoners, and also those who have been arrested in recent months, and are in fact being held in unsuitable conditions in Iranian prisons. She also expresses concern about the situation of, in fact, political prisoners, and the executions that the Islamic Republic is carrying out daily. She also asks the French president and the French foreign minister to strongly condemn the actions of the Islamic Republic, and also the situation Ms. Mohammadi is in, and to put pressure on the Islamic Republic in this regard.
Nilufar Pour-Ebrahim was reporting from Paris. In response to the drone and missile attacks by the Islamic Republic in recent hours, the president of the United Arab Emirates has said that the country, relying on its military capability, social cohesion, and governance power, is able to respond to any aggression effectively. This is while a wave of diplomatic reactions from the international community condemning Iran's recent attacks on the UAE continues, including the European Union, which has said it is ready to help de-escalate tensions. Our correspondent, Merhan Abbasian, is with us from Stockholm. Merhan, in an unprecedented way, not only regional countries, but even Europeans have shown extensive support for the United Arab Emirates, while the Islamic Republic hasn't even officially accepted responsibility for it yet, as of this moment.
Exactly, Fardad. In response to these attacks, a wave of condemnation has formed in Europe, both at the European Union level and from member states. The EU has stated it condemns these attacks and is ready to help de-escalate tensions and prevent the situation from worsening. At the country level, several main players in Europe have taken a stance. Countries like Germany, France, and the Netherlands issued separate statements condemning the attacks, noting that targeting civilian infrastructure can actually destabilize the region's situation. Well, the fundamental reason for that particular situation occurring is actually quite clear and obvious to everyone involved too. The reason for these reactions so quickly is the concern that tensions in the Middle East will increase, and its consequences will even extend to Europe. Although we should say that regarding fuel prices, these consequences have currently reached Europe. That's why, at the same time, they are in fact emphasizing diplomatic solutions and crisis containment. But among these stances, Sweden has appeared a bit more explicit. Fardad, the country's foreign minister, Maria Malmer, on X, while declaring solidarity with the United Arab Emirates, directly held the Islamic Republic responsible for these attacks, and strongly condemned it. Sweden has repeatedly considered the Islamic Republic's role destructive in the Middle East and Europe, and the foreign minister's recent post reiterates this stance. Maria Malmer emphasized that any solution must guarantee regional countries' security against the threats and attacks posed by the Islamic Republic. She is in fact telling this to the audience, or to the international community, or to European governments that the Islamic Republic might repeat this in the future. A commitment must be obtained from the Islamic Republic so that these missile launches and these attacks are not repeated. An issue that shows Stockholm's view on Iran's role is in fact a security-oriented and critical view. Well, these statements are in continuation of the same policy that Sweden has pursued in recent months, meaning emphasizing that the Islamic Republic's activities are not limited only to the Middle East and can extend to Europe as well. I should say that Ms. Malmer also mentioned today in a press conference that regarding her foreign policy, they are establishing a foreign intelligence agency, and one of the reasons for it is the Islamic Republic itself.
Thank you, Mehran Abbasyan, my colleague from Stockholm. Hossein Alizadeh, an international affairs analyst, has also joined us from London. Mr. Alizadeh, even during the war itself, the UAE was attacked by the Islamic Republic even more than Israel. Now, in the middle of a ceasefire, targets in the UAE, especially perhaps most importantly in Fujairah, have been targeted by the Islamic Republic again. Do you see a scenario, especially given the rhetoric we're hearing from both sides, where Iran and the UAE enter a full-blown war?
I highly doubt the UAE would want to take this big risk on its own. I mean, the UAE is like a glass building, investments, flights to the region in terms of air travel. Its economy has already declined significantly in terms of attracting investment. And if the Fujairah terminal is completely destroyed, its lifeline, its oil export route, will be totally gone. It does not seem likely that it would want to undertake this action alone, unless its underlying strategy is specifically to convince the United States to intervene. However, relying on the US is a flawed premise. Consider the precedent with Qatar, a nation Washington had formally designated as a major non-NATO ally. Despite this privileged diplomatic standing, the US remained silent in two critical instances. The first occurred when Israel launched an attack on Qatar. Even though Qatar is an American friend, and the US had been explicitly informed beforehand, Washington simply stood back and let Israel proceed. The US maintained this exact same passive stance when the Islamic Republic directed aggression toward Qatar. Ultimately, if the US failed to take defensive action for a state with Qatar's elevated standing, it is highly unlikely to take such decisive action for the UAE either. So no, I personally doubt the UAE would want to take this action directly and on its own, and the conditions aren't right for it.
But if it doesn't do anything, and the Islamic Republic keeps attacking it and it doesn't respond at all, isn't that a bit strange for a country with the UAE's prestige?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's considered a major blow to its overall reputation. But, well, the reality is, in the regional power equation between Iran and the UAE, Iran clearly has the upper hand, both in terms of geographic size, total population, military power, ballistic missiles, these kinds of things. But when comparing the broader power equation with the US, well, Iran undoubtedly has the weaker hand. So for the UAE to want to directly get involved in this highly risky business, it's really very dangerous for it. It doesn't even have a large native population to absorb such shocks. I've always described the Arab countries in a distinct way. Even though they're incredibly rich, successful capitalists, and have attracted vast foreign investment, I've always said their militaries are essentially party armies. This is in stark contrast to nations possessing true combat armies. In the Middle East, there are exactly 4 countries that have actual combat armies. One is Egypt, one is Israel, one is Turkey, and one is Iran. And when I mention Iran, I mean the comprehensive sum total of Iran's conditions, from the monarchy Mohammadi era until now. On that account, the rest of these countries, no matter how many advanced weapons they buy, like F-35 planes and all that, they're really just party armies. For example, look at an Emirati general. Compare him to a Turkish general, an Iranian general, an Israeli general. They're just not comparable at all. They haven't seen war. They haven't even seen a single bullet or shrapnel. Their bodies don't have a single injury. Whereas, for example, these other commanders are really men of action. On this basis, I think the UAE currently sees it as expedient to exercise restraint, until perhaps, one day the UAE can change America's mind. Just look at today. It was really interesting. They asked Pete Hegseth. Well, the UAE was attacked yesterday. Wasn't that a violation of the ceasefire? What did Pete Hegseth respond? He said, well, this is a different project. Its issue is something else. He easily brushed aside a country that during Trump's visit said, I'll invest $1 trillion. He just easily passed it by. From this, it seems that the UAE have the power to do this alone and the collective power of the Arab countries. I mean, the Persian Gulf ones, they don't have this unity either. For example, in these situations, the Arab League should be up all night, right? At least they should gather and issue a couple of statements. You don't see any strong language coming from the Arab League right now, or any strong language coming from Egypt. On this basis, the UAE itself naturally has this assessment that it shouldn't take a higher risk unless it brings the power of the US behind it, which I think the US is still procrastinating on. Maybe it wouldn't even mind too much if these guys get hurt. Then later, for their reconstruction, it would have to say, hey, I'll come and build your country. But, well, it would take a hefty sum of dollars. Well, this is Mr. Trump, He can make butter from water. Anyway, the UAE also knows that it shouldn't really count on Trump's words too much.
But at the same time, we see the Emiratis are playing more cards in the Israel and US campaign and are even significantly distancing themselves from regional alliances, whether it's from OPEC and OPEC+, or the things Anwar Gargash is saying now about the Arab League, let alone about the Gulf Cooperation Council. It's giving all the signals that the UAE seems to be separating itself from the rest of its regional allies.
Actually, that's exactly its weakness, Instead of, bringing the Arab brothers together around itself in these circumstances where it's been attacked, right now actually exiting OPEC, the blow from exiting OPEC, more than, for example, being a blow to the damaged economy of, Iran's oil, which can't be exported, who does it harm? It harms the big brother, Saudi Arabia. I don't even know if you're aware or not that Mr. Al-Qasimi belongs to, so to speak, the Emirate of Sharjah. Right now, just now, there's a discussion going on, and some people are even betting that Sharjah will actually exit the union with the UAE from the 7 countries that are together, the 7 Emirates.
Mr. Alizadeh. Now, this discussion, I saw it on social media, but there's really no evidence for it. It seems like a lot of these campaigns related to the Islamic Republic are the ones fueling this. I mean, not even a tangible documented article, not even a tweet, a post, a word from Sheikh Qasimi or other Emirati officials has really existed until this moment, except for these rumor-spreading networks of the Islamic Republic.
And the networks, what do you call them, the online gambling and betting syndicates, they, for example, got deeply involved in this. Also, regarding Al-Qasimi's political background, he definitely has a strong tendency leaning towards Saudi Arabia. He doesn't really agree with Mohammed bin Zayed's current positions. In fact, he considers himself his senior, seeing MBZ as his junior, so he doesn't really count on his leadership. But I want to emphasize that your overall assessment is completely correct. In a fragile situation where the UAE desperately should be creating strong regional alliances, it has instead severely offended Saudi Arabia, and it has also offended other oil-producing countries. For example, is Russia actually happy now that the UAE is coming forward and injecting so much excess oil into the global market that the huge financial income Russia is currently getting from its oil exports will inevitably also go down? So you see, it has taken a controversial action that has upset almost everyone, of course. And absolutely, it has immensely pleased Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump stated that this was a very big and important action. Mr. Trump Trump has formally thanked him for it. Anyway, I want to say that both due to its geographical proximity to neighboring Arab countries and these moves, it hasn't really been able to form much of a solid alliance. In terms of military power, as I said, it's considered a toy army. In terms of its vulnerability, because if that Fujah port is destroyed, everything the UAE has will be gone. Therefore, it will not enter into a military equation with Tehran. But absolutely, and absolutely, it also has tools at its disposal to carry out harassing actions. An example, a very important example, is that you in Iran need dollars, foreign currency, euros. How does euro currency income enter Iran? Through 3 routes. There is one from Afghanistan, one from the Kurdistan region, and about 70 to 80% flowing entirely through the UAE. It's the UAE that has a truly dynamic economy that can bring this crucial money into Iran, whether through illicit smuggling or any other method. Well, the UAE can clearly stop these things. Just as you've seen, it has prevented Iranian companies from operating and is continuously expelling them. So the overflow of foreign currency into Iran is completely prevented. Well, this is a massive harm for Iran, which is desperately looking for every single dollar to spend on the ongoing war. My overarching point is that the United Arab Emirates is certainly not helpless, but within the military arena, if it doesn't maintain a strong alliance with the US, it cannot take any major strategic action, although it has started significant military cooperation with Israel, like those advanced defense systems it has established, and so far it has intercepted and tracked many hostile missiles, drones, and other threats. Yes, the leadership has been highly successful in this specific area, but the country doesn't have 100% success in the broader military field, unless it can have Donald Trump by its side once again.
Now, among these Persian Gulf countries, the UAE is a very well-known name, especially considering the hostilities we've seen between Tehran and Abu Dhabi in recent months. So, it really stands out even more. But there's a reality that on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz, countries that incidentally don't have a port like Fujairah connecting to the Sea of Oman, unlike the UAE, they've actually become hostages in an even worse way. The Qataris, unlike other countries in the region, don't have much oil. It's all gas, and they can't store it. Kuwait hasn't sold even a single barrel of oil in the past month. Now, the Bahrainis are more dependent on the Saudis, and they can meet some of their needs through that bridge. But my point is that the countries located on the western side of the Strait of Hormuz, it seems, even though they're quieter than the Emiratis, they're in a much more difficult situation.
You are correct.
I apologize. Right now, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio just entered the White House podium. We want to go directly to Washington and hear what he has to say.
First, I'll make a brief statement, and then we'll address your questions. As you know, over the weekend, President Trump announced this Freedom Project, and its goal is, well, to help 23,000 civilians from several countries in the Gulf.
هزار غیر نظامی از چندین کشور در
who are currently stranded and left in a prolonged state of limbo in the Persian Gulf. The Iranian regime has intentionally kept these individuals displaced. Because what Iran is doing is not only blatantly criminal, but also increasingly desperate and extremely destructive to global stability. Various commercial ships from completely different nations that have absolutely nothing to do with this ongoing regional war are not only losing their valuable cargo right now, but the very lives of their innocent sailors are also at grave risk because of this reckless strait blockage by Iran. Because, as you know, after being stranded for a while, these ships inevitably run out of their essential drinking water, food, and supplies. Consequently, these vulnerable crews are essentially held as unwilling hostages of this brazen Iranian maritime piracy. Sometimes they have even been shot at. Iranian forces have carried out foolish, completely senseless, and unprovoked attacks on several maritime vessels. So honestly, these are entirely innocent people, commercial ships in sovereign countries that had absolutely nothing to do with this war. Now they are tragically stuck in the middle and taken hostage, simply because Iran feels empowered to do it. This happens because this ruthless regime operates without mercy, just as it brutally massacred tens of thousands of its own citizens, simply for the crime of peaceful protest, just because they desperately wanted a better quality of life and freedom. So now these innocent sailors are isolated, alone, and trapped in an agonizing limbo. Several of them have even been mercilessly killed right here. These are all civilians. Therefore, a significant number of ally countries, some operating secretly behind closed doors and others communicating openly on the international stage, have urgently requested robust protection and strategic support from the United States. Their goal is to successfully re-establish safe commercial navigation in this critical chokepoint, which remains a profoundly important waterway for global trade. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, President Trump has responded positively to this international request. He has decisively ordered the United States military to actively protect these vulnerable commercial ships so they can move safely through the contested waters and get out of there without further harassment. This decisive military deployment serves as our crucial first step to fully reopen the strait and put a definitive end to this deeply reckless and desperate act by this hostile regime. We are the only country with the naval capabilities that can take a step right now, and we have taken this step. Under President Trump's leadership, America will consistently help our friends, and we will stand up firmly against rogue regimes like the Tehran regime. We will never hesitate to use our unmatched military force in service of our vital national interests. What is truly important for everyone to clearly understand is that this is not an offensive operation. Rather, this is strictly a defensive operation, and its underlying meaning is very simple. We will absolutely not fire unless they choose to fire at us first. We are not attacking them unprovoked, but if they attack us or if they attack our ships, we have to respond to them with decisive action. You simply cannot allow a hostile boat to approach a ship and fire at it, and we will absolutely respond to such threats. And well, while I don't know the exact numbers offhand, we have been highly successful in our interception efforts so far. We will continue to target these hazards. We'll take down incoming drones, and we'll take down ballistic missiles. However, the core nature of this operation is strictly defensive. So if you hear a story about an offensive attack and a major exchange of fire and all that, there is no such exchange happening. We respond only if we're attacked first. This remains a purely defensive operation meant to protect lives. So about the importance of this strait, like almost a quarter of the world's oil goes through here, plus a massive amount of fuel and chemical fertilizers. We just can't let the Iranian regime dictate who gets to use this vital waterway.